Here's a segment from a recent Gun Talk radio episode. You can listen to all the Gun Talk radio podcasts however you tune in, or check out guntalk.com for more. I found another gun. Found another rifle. I'm going to be buying that one. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it is one of those that really depends upon reloading to make it work as best it can. And to talk about that is an old friend of mine. Ron Spomer joins us, gun writer, hunting writer, and, of course, the creator and head poobah at Ron Spomer Outdoors. How you doing, partner?
Oh, you make me laugh, man. I love your commentary on the Biden stuff.
Well, I mean, it's just so silly. They say these things, there's no recreational justification. You go, yeah, you don't quite understand that the whole idea was so we could have guns so we could stop and oppress the government. That's why we have it in the first place. So there it is.
Yeah,
oh, well.
I'll never get it.
Oh, well. So I'm just reading one of your latest pieces, and I love your writing. I love what you do with your videos and everything. And you're talking about, you kind of spun it off of the 30-06, but the real crux of it was how to get the most out of a cartridge. And it's kind of like, okay, people always land right in the middle when they're picking their bullet selections. I'm going to take a 150 grain or 165 grain bullet. But it sounds like what you were saying was, well, go explore the edges and see what happens.
Boy, you got that right. You know, it does make a lot of sense to pick a particular cartridge with a particular bullet that optimizes its performance, and that's your pronghorn rifle or your elk rifle or whatever. But There's an alternative, which, of course, is to hand load with a variety of different bullets and powders and primers and just see what you can produce, because it just increases the versatility of any cartridge so much. And, of course, as you noticed in that blog and video that I did on the 30-06, it really brings it into the 21st century. I just noticed that so many young people think the 30-06 is some sort of a fuddy-duddy antique. But when you look at what it can shoot these days, my comparison was that it is now able to do pretty much what the 300 Winchester mag was doing in the 1960s and 70s when it was all the rage, and it's still one of the go-to do-anything cartridges for hunting anywhere in the world. And here's the 30-06 now doing pretty much the same thing with less powder. And it's just worth looking into that.
You know that there are people who are going to say, Ron's lost it. The 30-06 cannot possibly do what the 300 mag can do. And, but you were very careful about what you said. The 30-06 today can do what the 300 Magnum was doing 3 or 4 decades ago. Explain why that qualification is important.
It's important because if you use the new powders and bullets and put them in a 300 Win Mag, it steps up a couple of levels the same way that the 30-06.
Yes.
So you're back to the same spread between them. But my point was that if we loved the 300 Win Mag for what it was doing for 40, 50, 60 years, gosh, it's been around since, 1964 or 63? Mm-hmm. And back in those days, it was like, God, you can't beat the 300 Win Mag. It's the 30-06 magnumized, 30-06 on steroids. So my point was, well, now we can load the 30-06 to be on steroids to do the same thing the 300 was doing way back when. And the new bullets just make a huge difference.
Well, and we're doing it, actually, I was going to say 2 different ways. 3 different ways come to mind. One is we have powders now we never had before, and we can actually get more velocity with the same pressures. So we're magnumizing, if you will, if that's a word, that way. But I think the more important one, and honestly, it's the one that, being old guys with gray hair, it's still hard for me sometimes to wrap my head around, is what I call the magic bullets we have today. And if you say, but I like the 150 grain, I like the 165 grain, and you said, but look at the heavier, longer, higher BC bullets. Yes, you're starting them out slower, but if you look at the actual charts, there's a payoff that actually you're regaining that plus, right?
Yeah, you sure are. I mean, the lighter one's going to shoot flatter most of the time, out to at least 1,000 yards. But as you know, we've talked about this before, we can make up for bullet drop since we know the exact distance to the target with a laser rangefinder. You just know your trajectory curve, and you've got your gravity taken care of. But the wind deflection, that's magic. And if you can nail down the wind and how much it's blowing at different distances on the way to the target to get a perfect hold, more power to you, but most of us can't. And that's where these high BC, long, heavier bullets come into play. So you save a couple, 3 inches on your wind deflection by going to the, well, let's say, for example, 190 grain AccuBond long range. I think that's the one I used in this comparison.
Right.
Years ago, I wouldn't have said you're going to optimize your 30-06 with a 190 grain bullet. It would have been 165. Right. Yeah. But as you said, you give up a little velocity, but you make up for it with your better resistance to that wind deflection. And I don't know about you, Tom, but that's the hardest thing for me is to judge where that bullet is going to be blown by the wind.
Well, it is. I mean, and I know, look, if you're shooting whitetails at 150 yards in Georgia, it just doesn't matter. Just shoot whatever bullet you like and it'll work. But if you get out west and the wind's blowing, I mean, a 10 mile an hour wind is a calm day. You know, you get a nice 20, 25 mile an hour wind, and at 400 yards, you're talking about 1.5 feet of drift, maybe 2 feet, depending on the bullet. I mean, and if you can cut that, I mean, literally cut that drift in half by choosing a high BC bullet, you know, what you've done is you've taken a lot of the error out of your best guess.
There you go. And that's exactly what we're driving at, is that how can you minimize the potential for error? Use your equipment to minimize error, then train yourself to be as good as you can be. And between the two of those, I think you're going to be miles ahead by paying attention to these higher BC bullets.
All right, hold that thought here, Ron. I'm going to come back. I want to talk about something else that's related to this. And now we're going to go into the very geeky world of riflery, which is by starting your bullet out slower, it enables you to use bullets of a different construction, which gives you a wider range of effectiveness at impact velocity. Yeah, I know. I said we're going to get geeky on this. Don't go far. We're talking with Ron Spomer from Ron Spomer Outdoors. All right, we're back with you. One of the great lies that is told in the gun world is that you're going to save money if you take up reloading. No, you're not going to save money. You're just going to shoot more, and that's okay. But also what you can do is you can create these custom loads that nobody else has. And now we're talking with Ron Spomer from Ron Spomer Outdoors. Check it out, ronspomeroutdoors.com. Ron, one of the things we've talked about in the past, I'll set it up for you. One of the bullet designer's biggest challenges is if you shoot a magnum load and you're throwing a bullet out really fast and you shoot an elk at 25 yards, you don't want the bullet to blow up, so it's got to be tough. But then if you shoot that same bullet and it's out at 600 yards, now you have much lower impact velocity. So now you still need to be able to expand at that distance. That's a real challenge, and there is something really sneaky, an advantage that's very subtle, a lot of people miss, about going with the heavier, slower, high BC bullets in terms of what they do on game. All right, you got the ball.
Yeah, you're talking momentum, essentially. If you cannot guarantee you're going to get adequate expansion and penetration, I think you can just say, we're just going to go for some superior penetration with a big, heavy bullet. And you can then afford to shoot a bit softer bullet because you've got more mass all told, so you do enhance the expansion a bit. But downrange, God, you got that kind of momentum. And you see it, I think, in these new super short subsonic rounds, like the 300 Hammer and the 300 Whisper and those sorts of things, the blackout.
Right.
You look at those little things and you think, what are you doing throwing a 220, 250 grain 308 bullet from those tiny little power supplies? You're not even going 1,000 feet per second. What is the point of this? But then when you realize that that particular heavy bullet has so much momentum that it just keeps driving through the animal, you don't get overexpansion. And that's just the way they work. They work via momentum. And it's unfortunate that our ballistic calculators don't figure momentum. They always tell you energy in your bullet. And as you well know, the energy in the bullet doesn't necessarily translate to good terminal performance. That's why our bullet manufacturers are always trying to build the ideal bullet that is going to work at 20 yards as well as 600 yards. Tough assignment. So this is what folks are doing with their hand loading. You load things down, you use a heavier bullet instead, as long as you're not trying to shoot flat as a laser out to 600 yards and you can compensate for your drops and stuff. That big, massive bullet can still do the job. And then some of them even tumble, which is pretty effective as well. When that big, long, slope-nosed bullet starts to tumble inside of the animal, it's doing essentially what an expanded bullet would do.
Tearing things up. All right, let me switch on it. You have been a bad influence on me. You've returned the favor. I tend to enable people so they'll buy guns, but then I'm listening to you and went, yeah, okay. Darn it, Ron, you made me buy a gun. So I found a Dakota Model 10. It's like a Ruger number 1 that you left in the dryer too long and shrunk it down.
Yep.
And it's in 7x57.
Ooh, sweet. Made a good choice there, my friend.
Well, and that's one of those cartridges. I haven't picked it up yet. So I haven't gotten it yet. And it's like, okay, I'm thinking, I need that like a hole in the head. I have two 708s already, and I have another 7x57, but that's okay because I don't have with this gun, which is one of the sleekest, trimmest. Mm-hmm. Somebody called it a feline-looking gun. It's so trim. It's like a cat all stretched out. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is. I borrowed one about 3 years ago in South Africa near Kimberley, and it was a 757. Oh, my gosh, it was a gorgeous rifle, beautiful wood, and it shot like a house of fire. I was shooting running warthogs with that thing. You usually think a single shot. It's not what you would pick for running game, but that thing pointed like my right arm. It just stick it out there, and it would go where my eye was looking. It was almost like shooting a shotgun. I took so much game, and it was, oh man, you're going to love that rifle, Tom. That is just spectacular.
Well, and that's one where it's a hand loader's cartridge because the factory loads are necessarily kept low pressure because of old guns. But this cartridge has been out for like almost 130 years now.
Yeah, came out, 92? 1892.
1892, yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
And it actually is almost, along with the 8mm Mauser, it's kind of the father of pretty much everything else. I mean, the 30-06 is just, you look at it and you go, yeah, that's just a bigger 7x57 and on and on.
Yeah.
But, you take that 7x57, the 7 Mauser, and now you start loading heavier bullets because the old, WDM Bell killed over 1,000 elephants with it by using long bullets that penetrated well. And it seems counterintuitive. You think, no, I want more velocity. Actually, no, it's working against you in this case.
Yeah, well, you get too much expansion, then you don't get the penetration. And he was using solids and taking brain shots. And he was averaged 1.5 shots per elephant taken.
Wow.
That tells you, A, the bullets were doing their job, the rifle was doing its job, but also the marksman was doing his job. Because he could brain shoot an elephant from pretty much any direction. He studied their anatomy so that he knew where to aim on the side of their head, the back of their head, whichever direction they were moving away from. He could take a shot and hit the brain, and it worked beautifully for him. And that 757, of course, his was a 275 Rigby, which was the British version of the 757. They just renamed it. Identical.
I was just going to say, well, the British, they said, well, we love the cartridge, and we're going to chamber some rifles in this cartridge. But I'll be darned if we're going to call it a 7mm Mauser, because we don't really like the Germans. So we're going to give it our own name and call it the 275 Rigby.
Bingo. There you go. And meanwhile, we're going to buy some Mauser actions to build our Rigby.
Yes, we're going to use the Mauser actions to build our British rifles with, but we're not going to let anybody know that's what we're doing, right?
Yep, and they still do it. But both of them build some pretty fantastic rifles. Whether you get a Mauser or a Rigby, today they've updated it and they're building them again, and they are absolutely stellar. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was at Wesley Richards down in Florida this week looking at some of the stuff they have. And again, they're making guns, but they're not making a lot of them. I think he said they're making like 25 a year, and that's rifles and shotguns combined. So that's a teeny tiny boutique outfit.
Yeah, it sure is. But boy, what a lot of history between both the rifle and the ammo, and that 757. I hope a lot more people start revisiting that thing because it does everything the 708 does. It can do everything the 284 Winchester can do. These are all short action cartridges, but it's just got so much pizzazz and history and cachet behind it that and when you feel them in your hand, they're so long and sleek, and they've got a little more sloped shoulder, which is not the standard these days. But once you start using it and seeing how well it performs, you just lose all interest in 40-degree shoulders or 35-degree shoulders or anything else. It's just like, this does the job.
There's just so much history involved. I mean, you feel like you're there with Hemingway and Salou and all these other famous hunters. And the other thing is, if you're a hand loader, and we'll go back to that, the 7x57, you can take it right up to a 280 or just within a hair's breadth of a 280 Remington, and that'll take care of anything you want to shoot.
Sure. You just have to make sure that you've got a modern action that'll stand and easily will do modern rifles. This thing was pressures were kept low because it was in the early Mausers, the 93 Mauser, Spanish Mauser, and they weren't necessarily a strong model 98 that finally came out, and that sort of set the stage for all bolt action rifles from then on out. Everybody gets compared to the 98 Mauser, super strong. So if you have that equivalent or a Model 70 or any of the modern rifles, chamber that in 757, load the pressures up in that baby, and like you say, you're shooting a 280 Remington.
Exactly. So tell me quickly, what have you been shooting? What have you been getting in? You get a lot of the fun guns in. So what's gotten your attention over the last few months?
Oh, gosh, there's just all sorts of fun stuff coming down the pike here. I'm playing around with some super mini actions in the 6.5 Grendel, those really short cartridges. Just experimenting with them so I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. And then there's some pretty interesting 22 rimfires coming out, high-quality bolt actions that are supposed to shoot like a house of fire. And I've always enjoyed 22 rimfires that really shot well. You remember the Kimbers?
Yep.
22 Kimbers, yeah. I've got a couple of those that'll shoot a quarter MOA. It's unbelievable stuff. So this new company's coming out. I can't divulge exactly what it is yet, but very soon they're going to release. And then we've got the new lever actions from Marlin. Of course, they did the 4570. They're supposed to be turning loose the 3030 sometime this year, so it would be like the new 336 Marlin lever action 3030. It'd be really fun to see what sort of improvements they make on that.
And they're actually better. I mean, people say, are they as good as the old ones? I say, no, they're actually better. They really are.
Yeah, I think so. And with the modern CNC machining and stuff. Wow. Yep.
And I'm looking forward to when they finally get around to making the ones in pistol cartridges, get 44s and 357s. That's just a ton of fun. So I'm excited about that too.
Yeah. There's never a shortage of guns that we want to get and play around with, is there?
No kidding. Let me send people to your website. It's Ron Spomer Outdoors, SPOMER, RonSpomerOutdoors.com. You got your blog, you got your videos, you got everything else. People can ask you questions. They can, follow you and do everything else. I appreciate what you're doing because you do it so darn well.
Oh, thanks, Tom. I appreciate what you do. Keep spreading the word and hammering those politicians, trying to maybe beat some sense into them.
Yeah, it's going to take all of us to do that. Best to you. You guys take care. I'm going to swing by there and see you at some point.
Do that. We'll be waiting for you.
Sounds good. Take care, Ron Spomer. This is a guy that really knows the stuff. And you know what? More than that. Fun to read his stuff and also really fun to watch his videos when he says, okay, let's compare the 280, is the 270 better than the 6.5 Creedmoor? According to him, the answer is yes. You agree?